Hey everyone, it's Mark with Cuplet Fern, Florida Native Plant Society. Thank you so much for joining us. I have Anita Camacho here. Anita probably can't see you right now but she's waving to you all. So hey, the beauty of technology. Imagine that, right? It just has completely changed and transformed our programming for the better. So welcome to Cuplet Fern, chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. I have a few announcements to go through for our membership, and then I will hand things over to Anita. First of all, Anita, I just want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I know it's a busy time business-wise. I know you're a CPA as well, so it means a lot to me for you to make a little bit of precious time for a very important and popular subject, butterflies. So let me get through my announcements and then hand things over to you. As you probably know, Cuplet Fern is our motto for the Florida Native Plant Society, the conservation, preservation, and restoration of Florida native plants and native plant communities. This is available on YouTube. So in case you are wondering, how do I support Cuplet Fern? How can you do it within 3 seconds? And how can you do it for free? The best part is just go to youtube.com/cupletfern and see native plants like never before. Matter of fact, I have it on a separate tab here. And we have, I think we're celebrating our 110th educational video at this point. So we have lots to choose from. We did one on aquatic butterflies with Sean Patton last year, and it gives me great pleasure to continue the butterfly discussion with Anita. But it's all here, and you can click subscribe, which is the button, as you can see in the right corner. It says subscribe in red, and go ahead and support us for free. It's an easy, surefire way to show us that you care. So thank you so much in advance. This is a special series with Anita. As you know, tonight is Monarchs and brush-footed butterflies. Next month is Swallowtail Cocktail, discussing swallowtail butterflies, and that will be on April 11th. After that is Whites and Sulfur Butterflies, and that's on May 9th. And finally, to round things off, is Skip with the Skippers and a Metal Mark butterfly on June 13th. So by the time you blink, in a few months, you'll have all four as part of a special series with Anita that you can review if you have subscribed on our YouTube channel. I always like to plug the license plate. So the license plate information is here. You can always go to fnps.org/support/license. Or if you're viewing this on a flat screen or on a tablet, please go ahead and point your smartphone to the QR code in the bottom right corner, and it will take you to the website, which will give you further directions and instructions on how to support the Native Plant Society through the license plate initiative. It's a wonderful initiative. It has great promise to change the landscape of what we do as far as outreach, conservation, our overall mission, in deep, meaningful, and sustaining ways for many years to come. So please consider for you or a loved one to support the license plate initiative. There's our Melanie Simon from Passion Flower chapter sporting a photoshopped image of the license plate on the back of a car, but you too can be part of the journey and part of the movement to support Florida Native Plant Society through the license plate. Cuplet Fern members are in Central Florida. We are primarily in North Orlando, the metropolitan areas that encompass Seminole and West Volusia counties. Or you can be a distance learner. We have some people that are out in Ohio and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania that never set foot here in Florida, but they visit from time to time, or they're just really passionate about what we do for our region, and you can definitely support us through those means. However, if you happen to be in Florida and you happen to be in another region, we strongly suggest that you support a chapter more local to you. So come discover and come grow with us. Like I see, it's my motto these days, to see native plants like never before. I still remember my journey early on. It transformed me, and it made me see even the most diminutive weed, porterweed, butterfly weed. The list goes on in a very special way. And we do a lot of things, as you probably know. There's lots of events going on. We have a plant sale March 26th at Geneva Wilderness Area, the Ed Yarborough Nature Center. They are celebrating Native Plant Day. It is from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m. So just for a few short hours, we'll be conducting a plant sale there. Please come out and support us, as well as take advantage of a beautiful property, the Geneva Wilderness Area. And of course, we do field trips, virtual learning like this, internships. And this is us. Chelsea is actually on the back end right now training with me. So there's Chelsea, Kaylee, and the rest of the gang. But come join us, and we'd love to see you out at a field trip or a plant rescue. And it's easy as going to fnps.org. Click join, and then you can click Cuplet Fern, or just remember fnps.org/join. And like I said, support us through membership. We'd love to have you. There's student, individual, household, and business level membership. In case you are part of a different region in Florida, there are several chapters that serve and are more local to your region. So please consider choosing them as well. And tonight we have Monarchs and brush-footed butterflies with Anita Hohenthaner Camacho. So Anita, if you can hear me, I'm going to go ahead and put your presentation on our screen. And if you can, please introduce yourself to the viewership. You have 24 viewers right now watching you. And of course, you'll have several more that are unable to join us live, but will be watching this later on through our YouTube channel.
Opportunity to do this with you for the 4 series, and looking forward to doing each and every one of them. They're all very unique and special. Tonight, we're going to kind of go over some things that I probably won't include in the next 3, some of the earlier things about butterflies in general. Tonight, we're focusing on our flagship butterfly, Monarchs, and also other brush-footed butterflies. My email's at the bottom if you want to make note of that, anita@butterflytampa.com. So feel free to keep that and stay in touch or send me questions if you have them. I know we're going to do a little bit of that at the end. So here we go. So to tell you a little bit about what I'm doing, I have been a CPA for about 30 some years. I've lost count how many exactly, but I'm looking to make some big shifts out of the accounting world and focus more on our ecosystem in Florida. And that's what I've been spending a lot of my time doing for quite a while, but want to dive in completely. So we have the Tampa Bay Butterfly Foundation, which is a nonprofit that I set up for the benefit of our Tampa Bay area to restore, to the extent possible, habitat for butterflies, which we're not really, I guess, restoring. We're just trying to put in more habitat at this point. And through that, the Little Red Wagon was established as well to get more Florida back into Florida. So speaking to this group, you guys are all about native plants and already, so this is very familiar to you. We started the native nursery actually during a COVID shutdown in April of 2020, and it went so well, we went ahead and opened the location in South Tampa. And so we've been open there since August of 2020. And we're looking to get our butterfly conservatory open this summer. Construction actually starts Monday officially. So we're pretty excited about that. So those two, the butterfly conservatory and the nursery, the proceeds, the profits from those, the proceeds go to Tampa Bay Butterfly Foundation to put more Florida back into Florida, work on education and research projects as well. So I am also a director with the Suncoast chapter of the Native Plant Society here locally in Tampa, and the president of the North American Butterfly Association of Tampa Bay. And I founded that chapter. North American Butterfly Association is a national group that focuses on butterflies in North America and research and tracking of populations. And we here as a chapter work at the state and local level to also bring that monitoring information to the national group with our butterfly counts and monitoring of populations. So some of the projects the last couple of years that we've been working on are listed here. The Center for Conservation was one of our biggest projects so far, working with Florida Aquarium, Florida Fish and Wildlife, and TICO. They opened that officially in January this year. We've been working on it with that group for about 3 years on a 20-acre property near the Manatee Viewing Center in Apollo Beach. And they had contacted me because they've kind of got all the water aspects covered with between the aquarium, working on their greenhouses for the coral reef spawning, where they're repopulating the Gulf and Atlantic with new coral. And also Florida Fish and Wildlife has a hatchery there, as well as a Suncoast Youth Center. And they wanted to get more habitat put on the property because the property had essentially been scraped for construction. So we started working on habitat, and January of 2020 actually planted the first grouping of plants. And over the January, February, March, over 2,000 plants were put in. And then we had COVID shutdown within a few days of our last planting. So we were not allowed on property after that for quite a while. And I was pretty nervous. They had to let their groundskeeping folks go during that time. So there was nobody there to water and establish the plants. And it was a drought time of year, as we know. And also then we have rainy season and heat of the summer. So the soonest we were able to get on property was August. So I was pretty nervous driving down there to see how things turned out. And much to my pleasure, we only lost one plant out of 2,000. So that really, really speaks to native plants in Florida and our sandy soil and how well they can do. So I was pretty excited about that. And we've continued to increase the habitat down there. And the butterflies went from about 5 species to over 25 that we've monitored now, just in that short amount of time. So we're pretty excited about that project. And they did just open that complex to the public in January. So pretty cool. If you get an opportunity to come down here and visit the Manatee Viewing Center, you can take a walk over to that property as well. And they also have Turtle Rehab and Surgery Center there as well. NFL Green Week was another big thing we were involved in. That's where with Super Bowl coming here, the NFL puts a lot of money into the city where the Super Bowl is hosted for NFL or for green initiatives. They contacted us to do some pollinator gardens. So we did a couple pollinator gardens and also helped keep Tampa Bay beautiful with some coastal projects also. And Encore Technology Park is actually a half-acre park in downtown Tampa that we pretty much redid. About 85% of that is now native. It was not looking very special, and there's an artist that had put in a really big metal art installation he was out of Seattle, and he was very disappointed with the look of the park and asked them to plant natives. So it would require less water, and it would keep the sprinklers off of his metal structures. So that was a really fun project. We did that last year, and it's looking amazing. So it's pretty cool to be in an urban downtown setting like that. So that was a fun project. Hell strip to habitat, that's the area either on the sides of service roads, little strips of property, or between the sidewalk and the street. Very difficult to get things to grow, but we've been working with several groups working on their hell strip areas to increase habitat in those spots as well. And some of these other things, working with universities, Emory University, University of Florida, and University of Georgia with students, sponsoring them and their research, mostly on Monarch so far. And with USF on interns, we actually just hired one of their interns a couple weeks ago. So she started as our education coordinator. So we're pretty excited about that. Do a lot of kids camps here, school gardens, and a lot of presentations at the nursery. We have an education center there as well. So we have a lot of things going on. This is actually the hell strip behind the nursery. When I first got the space there, it was actually quite a mess. I unfortunately didn't take a picture before we cleaned up all the litter, but it was pretty full of litter. People just driving through here. It's, for service roads so that the garbage trucks can get through, and also deliveries for the different businesses. So we planted that and fixed it up in May of last year. And within a couple months, things looked a lot better. And what was really a neat outcome that I didn't expect was that we were picking up probably 4 or 5 big 5-gallon buckets of trash every day before we planted all these plants and put in a little bit of signage. And now we hardly have any trash at all. So I guess folks decided it wasn't a dumping site anymore. So a lot of the neighbors are pretty excited about all the butterflies they see flying, and the bees and everything else. So it's turned out to be a pretty neat project behind the nursery, and also somewhat of a demonstration garden where people can kind of see what these plants look like when they get a little bit more mature. A big initiative that I've kind of taken to heart is was started by Dr. Doug Tallamy, the Homegrown National Park, and bringing the Florida back into our landscape so that wildlife can be part of where we are versus going to a national park to see it. With 86% or more of the east of the Mississippi being privately owned, this has become more and more important that we work on this and get the word out and show people how easy this kind of gardening is. And truly, gardening with natives is about the easiest gardening you can do. So with garden clubs, I do talk a lot about the landscapes and departing from this attachment to these what I call green cement lawns that are very expensive and cause a lot of noise pollution with all the machines that it takes, and a lot of chemical pollution with keeping it green. And then, of course, the cost of replacing it every few years. And nothing can survive in all of that very well. And it's also very bad for our health as well as our pets' health and our children. So I know that we've heard so many years, and I remember even growing up hearing about dollarweed, and also called pennywort. And funny thing is that little plant has both of its common names are about money. So I said, well, there's just got to be some value in this plant. And when I dug into it a little bit more, found out it's edible. And one of the things that I like about it, when I had a lawn before, it was a freedom lawn. So whatever grew, we just kind of kept it trimmed up, and it looked green all year. This is one of the plants that was there. And nice thing that is it just grows very low to the ground, and you don't even have to mow it, but it's always green, which is one of the benefits. So kind of a fun little plant. So we were, and I think that to a big extent, we still are really brainwashed in the 20s with a lot of ads about killing anything that moved pretty much. That was a big campaign from chemical companies. They're still at it, and they're a huge group to kind of go after. But really, this is the biggest part of the messaging for me is departure of from toxic pesticides and all the chemicals in our landscapes. So we have this responsibility to our planet, our ecosystems, and I think wildlife as well. So that's one of the things that's pretty important to me, which is how I actually got started, I guess, switching over, which I kind of went through metamorphosis, so to speak, of completely getting away from the non-native exotic plants and learning a lot more about this, starting about 25 years ago when my mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I didn't really understand that disease until I started researching it. And everything seemed to be tied to toxic pesticide exposure. So that was kind of a turning point for me. I stopped using any toxic chemicals in my house, around my house. And I'm an avid rose gardener as well, have been since I was a teenager. And I've always had roses and butterfly gardens, and I've always kept them apart. Well, what I found when I stopped spraying the roses and stopped using anything on them, I just deadheaded for about 6 months. The next thing I know, they actually started looking even better. And they haven't had black spot, thrips, aphids, or any of those things that I was spraying for, which was, the protocol with Rose Society groups. And they have their own defense mechanism, and they fend off things pretty well if you're using, Fortuniana rootstock, which does really well here in Florida. So it was interesting that the bugs that I was trying to eliminate from the rose garden were always on the butterfly plants. And that's the companion planting between the two works out really, really well. So I still have just a few roses, not very many anymore like I used to, but they still do really well. And focusing a lot more with my sunny areas on the butterflies and the pollinators. So it's been kind of a fun time getting involved in all this over the years. And so now we'll dive in to some of our natives and talk about our number one nectar source in Florida being the saw palmetto and cabbage palm. When those are in bloom, those things are just magnets for every pollinator you can imagine. and a big resource, especially since it's such a widely plant that's widely seen in Florida. The second resource for nectar in the state of Florida is actually citrus. Wild lime is our native citrus, but the non-native citrus is also a very big producer of nectar for our pollinators. And the third resource, which a lot of people are not really fond of this plant, they consider it a nasty weed to be evicted at all costs. But Spanish needles, also the scientific name of Bidens alba, is an herb, an edible herb actually, and it's a native, or it's the host plant for the dainty sulfur butterfly. So that butterfly uses this plant for its caterpillars to eat, and we can eat this plant as well. It doesn't really have a lot of flavor to me, but lettuce doesn't either, but I put it on my salads and it makes the salads look kind of pretty. We also use them in arrangements at the nursery and at home. And this actually was a Bidens in this image that was growing on the fence at the nursery, and it had almost the shape of a heart. So I trimmed it up just a little bit for Valentine's Day. I had no idea that this plant would grow on the fence like this, and it's actually weaving itself through almost like a vine. So it's kind of become one of our focal points. We're working on trying to shape it like a shamrock for St. Patty's Day this week. So a really cool plant. If you can use this anywhere in your yard or allow it to be in your yard, it's an evergreen all year long. When nothing else is blooming, this is, and the butterflies absolutely love it. So going back in time, if you've been in Florida for any length of time, especially going back to the 90s and early 2000s, we have our love bug season that's twice a year, about April and September. And with all the insects disappearing like they are, this is one of them. And it's happening to all of the insects. We know that the monarchs, there's a big plight for the monarchs, of course. That's our flagship insect in the United States. But we used to have to put bras on the front of our cars to protect the grills so these bugs wouldn't bake into our grill and into the paint of the car. And the way we used to get rid of them when I was growing up is we'd take a dryer sheet and put it in a squirt bottle with some water, shake it up, spray it on the windshield in the front of our car, and wipe it off with another dryer sheet. I didn't really think about it back in the day because it wasn't easy to get them off if you didn't use that method. And now I kind of wonder what's in our dryer sheets, but it does work really well. So it's one of those things where we've really lost sight of the importance of the bottom of the food chain, and insects are very critical to our existence in our biosphere, and something we really need to think about having more of in our landscapes. And the plants really benefit from them as well, of course. Wildlife support is important, the food webs, all the habitats. With regard to native plants, this is all things that you all are very familiar with. For me, it's easier and healthy gardening. Anybody can do it, kids, adult, anybody can do it. And then it's safer for our pets because we're not using toxic chemicals, or we shouldn't be. So one of the things that I've been very focused on for quite a while is the study of Lepidoptera. And this image, this is actually a very magnified look at a monarch wing. So you see the scales, almost like a shingles of the roof, which is part of how solar panels were developed, was by looking at how the wings of a butterfly absorb the sun. And they need to absorb the sun into their wings in order to fly and warm themselves up. So it's pretty critical that these scales don't get damaged to help their flight. So we'll start off with talking about monarchs. I think most everybody loves this butterfly. It's a very charismatic butterfly and super popular, and has gotten a ton of attention over the past 20 to 25 years with populations declining significantly. Monarchs, while we do have a very unique situation in eastern United States with the migration, there are monarchs, of course, on the West Coast that have a smaller migration in California to Washington. We've got monarchs in Hawaii. We've got a monarch population in Australia and New Zealand, and also in bits of Europe. So this butterfly is actually in quite a few places, but the most unique situation is certainly the migration that goes on in the East Coast between Canada and Mexico. And we are having sightings of the butterflies migrating through Florida. While we do have a year-round population of monarchs in Florida that did evolve with the Asclepias perennis, which is an evergreen milkweed here. We do have a migration bit that comes through here, and they have been seen going across the Gulf of Mexico and resting overnight on oil rigs and boats, which is quite a journey to make it all the way across that body of water and then still get to Mexico. It's quite amazing that these butterflies make it that far. But they tend to use the jet stream to help them at about 10,000 feet or so is where they see them pretty often in planes and things. So some interesting news, I guess, out of California. Last year, a lot of folks were quite devastated with the population being less than 2,000 butterflies and with 100 people counting. So that was pretty, what seemed to be pretty bad news. This year, the population's bounced back up to over 250,000. So there was definitely a big pop-up. They've had a lot of issues with drought and higher temperatures with climate change. And butterflies really like a mean temperature, average mean temperature of about 70 degrees throughout the year. So when that temperature is higher than that, a lot of things can go wrong with their population. So that is a big indicator, as well as the habitat in drought season may not pop up. The milkweed's popping up at just the right time for when the monarchs are going through. So it was good to see this population improve this year. We haven't yet seen the numbers for our eastern migration, so we're still waiting to get that updated chart. But with any luck, we'll have an uptick there with all the initiatives that have been going on with over 50 groups studying the monarchs in North America. So one of the things I did when I was putting a PowerPoint together a while back on monarchs is I said, well, how far is the farthest monarch gone? I asked Google. And when you ask Google things, you don't always know what you're going to get. So came back with 40 million miles, and I was like, okay. So that seems a little long. I was looking for something around 3,000 miles from Canada to Mexico, and some of these other fun facts that that the monarchs have traveled and how fast. So this is how they did it. They sent 3 monarch caterpillars up at the 4th and 5th instar stage of the caterpillar, and with some space caterpillar food. This was with University of Kansas and Monarch Watch. In November 2009 on the space shuttle, and they wanted to see if the butterflies would complete metamorphosis and how they would do with completing metamorphosis. And they did complete metamorphosis, and it's kind of an interesting little video. You can look it up if you want to on C-SPAN, where the monarchs are in the chamber. And when a monarch first emerges, the most critical time is the first few hours. They're still completing metamorphosis. They're finished. Their proboscis is 2 parts and it needs to become 1. And they're pumping meconium out of their body and also a lot of fluids through their wings and to expand their wings to be able to fly. So there's just a lot more development that happens initially right after. And they have to hold on to that chrysalis and hopefully not fall, because their wings often will break if they fall off the chrysalis, which it helps that they are brush-footed. So when you watch this video, they're kind of hanging onto this chrysalis while they're floating all over the place in this chamber. And then when they started to fly, they weren't going anywhere. So kind of an interesting video. I felt sort of sad for them, but they did tell me that the butterflies were a little bit smaller and that they were a little dehydrated, but they did emerge, and they are forever on display at the University of Kansas now. So if you ever are out that way, you can go take a look at the space monarchs. And I guess they included a lot of kids and schools in this process too, which was kind of neat. So other threats that monarchs are facing, of course, logging in Mexico, where they overwinter, is a big issue. It is illegal, but that doesn't stop people from going in the middle of the night. They've done some pretty horrific things to some of the people that have been trying to protect those sanctuaries. So it's been a little devastating with Mexico for the monarchs. So we also have the farming, which crops used to be planted further apart where there'd be rows in between, and the milkweeds would grow there. And with the increased use of herbicides and overhead spraying and the compact crops now, where they've don't really have those significant rows any longer, we just don't have the host plants there any longer. So some of the groups that in North America are working on the monarch have reached out to farmers to utilize the perimeter of their property in areas where they're not actually using for farmland to increase the monarch milkweeds, so they have those as they're going through the migration. So that has actually been pretty beneficial, and hopefully that will continue to grow. We've already talked about pesticides, climate change, and manicured lawns. We know that there's natural predators, wasps and spiders and things for the monarchs, and humans are actually one of their problems as well, because first of all, we're getting rid of a lot of their habitat, but there's a lot of people doing home rearing, which has been showing to increase the disease rate, especially in Florida, where they're here all year. So there's some issues with that came out in a study recently from Emory University, that the butterflies being released are in many cases not being tested and being released, and they're sick. And now they're breeding also with the migrators. So this has become recently a lot more of a discussion on how that's going to be handled. And I know in California, they have started to take measures to prevent home rearing. I'm not sure how they're going to manage that, but time will tell. And I think because their population got so low last year, they started to take swifter measures. So the monarch life cycle is about 20 to 30 days in the summer, the warmer months here, which we're summertime, just about 9 months out of the year, I think. Cooler months, they've gone up to, I've had them go up to 45 days. In the winter months, the caterpillar is going to be a little darker in form with a lot more black. And they do that because they need to hold the heat in the winter months. So that's how they regulate temperature. And in the summer months, they're going to have a lot more white on the caterpillar, which lets the heat out. So this is in the caterpillar phase, how they manage their temperature. And this is a question that's come up over the years as to what this gold rim is on this beautiful chrysalis, which all chrysalis have the same mechanism, but the gold rim on the chrysalis is actually oxygen ports that help the caterpillar, as it's going through metamorphosis, get oxygen. And each species has its own mechanism of this. This happens to be probably one of the most beautiful chrysalis. And this was realized in 2012 by Dr. Richard Stringer with his CT scanning and kind of some cool stuff that he put together on this. So that was some really interesting findings. So the easiest way to tell males from females, the top butterfly where the arrows are pointing to those dots, that's the easiest way to determine that that's a male. The female is below and she has thicker veins, but when they're on the wing and flying, it's a lot harder to notice that. But even when the wings are folded, you can usually see those pheromone spots on the males. So those are the easiest, it's the easiest way to tell. And this works for the queen butterfly and the soldier as well. So the butterflies we have in our exhibit come from breeders that go through great lengths to make sure that the butterflies are healthy. And the butterflies that they send me, they're typically males. And even in chrysalis, because that's how they ship them to me, is in pupa form. They have the female on the left has that segment that goes from one end to the other. It's hard to explain this without being there, but there's a line that goes from one segment to all the way to the end. And on the butterfly chrysalis on the right, there's a tiny dot, and sometimes that dot's missing all completely. And that's in between those two bigger squares on the right side of the chrysalis there. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, I can explain it maybe a little bit better later. So in Florida, we have over 21 species of milkweeds and 6 species of milk vines, and readily available on a commercial basis, usually about 5 species of milkweeds, and so far 1 of the species of milk vines that are for sale. On the left, the picture there is the Asclepias perennis, which is the evergreen milkweed in Florida. It only gets to be about 2 feet tall. This is actually my favorite milkweed because it grows in shade, it grows in the sun, it grows in wet conditions, dry conditions. It pretty much will take anything Florida has to offer, even though in its name it says aquatic. I have been able to grow this plant pretty much anywhere in my yard, and it blooms in the shade as well, which is kind of neat. The milkweed on the right is the pink swamp milkweed, and this is one that will go dormant in the winter in about November through February. So a lot of people might think that, oh, my milkweed's dead, and it's not dead. What happens is you just need to cut it back to about 1 inch or 2, leave that center stick, because the roots are attached, and that plant will actually push up from the roots in the springtime. So you've got to leave the stick that's attached to the roots and not lose track of it, because if you pull that, then the plant is probably done. Those are coming up. Actually, they started popping up about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we've had a couple cold snaps, so it's kind of confused the milkweed, I think, a little bit. On the left, there is butterfly weed, which is a tuberosa. This one also goes dormant in the same time frame, about November to February or March. This one has a tuber root, so it doesn't even have a stick or anything showing when it goes dormant. It goes completely flat to the ground. You won't see any sign of life, but the tubers are still there. I usually put a sign or something near it so I know where they are. So when they pop up, I know where to expect them to be, because they pop up from those little tuber roots. So the world milkweed, that one seems to be more evergreen in my yard at least, has very small leaves on it, but it is still something that the monarchs and queens will use. So those are 4 of the ones that we have at the nursery pretty often that are fairly easy to grow. And then the white twine vine milkweed, this one is definitely monarch lovers, that folks that are trying to get monarchs in their yard and they're running out of food all the time because caterpillars eat the milkweeds up so quickly. But this twine vine is something that they'll eat. They don't necessarily readily lay eggs on it like the queen butterfly does, but it is a plant that if you're running out of milkweed constantly, this plant grows at about the rate of a foot a week on the runners, and then it leaves out once the runners stop running. And when it blooms, the whole stem is in bloom, and it's just stunning. And pollinators just go crazy when it is in bloom. So like in many wildlife creatures, there's mimicry and butterflies. The butterfly on the left, while one of the identifiers is where that circle is that dot, but when these butterflies are flying, that dot is hard to see. We typically look at that smile line that's kind of at the bottom on that butterfly on the left, the smile line that's going on the bottom 2 wings, as our indicator that this is a viceroy. And viceroys use coastal willow, which only makes them mildly toxic, so they're somewhat edible for birds. However, if a bird eats a caterpillar of a monarch or queen or the butterfly, the bird will get sick and it won't do it again. And they actually remember this. So when a bird sees this orange viceroy, it looks at that and thinks that it's a monarch if it's already tried the monarch thing, and it will leave the viceroy alone. So it gets some protection from being a lookalike. So let's change over and talk about some landscapes. Similar to the fact that we don't like to eat the same thing every meal, 3 meals a day, day in and day out, our pollinators really like variety as well. And not all pollinators have the same length of proboscis in butterflies. Some have longer proboscis and can get into tubular flowers like your tropical sage or your coral honeysuckles. And some need a landing pad. Monarchs are one of those butterflies that really needs a landing pad. I know Gaillardia is not considered truly native anymore, but it is still being sold at a lot of native nurseries, and growers are still producing it. But it is one of those that provides a nice landing pad. In my garden, Starry Rosinweed is a very popular one, as well as tick seeds and black-eyed Susans for the monarchs that give them a nice spot to land so they can nectar. But the swallowtails, for example, are very strong flyers, and we'll talk about swallowtails in the next session, but they're very strong flyers, and those tubular flowers work really well. So planting a variety brings in just a whole lot more movement. You have to have your host plant so the butterflies stick around to lay their eggs, but they've got to have nectar for the adults so that then you'll have a lot more movement in your yard if you put those 2 things together. So this is a gorgeous meadow. I wish this was my backyard. This is a 20-acre meadow in Tallahassee. It used to be a dairy farm. It backs up to a preserve, and this couple bought the farmhouse and basically planted the entire property for pollinators and butterflies. And those flowers, a lot of those flowers were actually about 4 to 5 feet tall. So they mow a path through the areas, and they have each section of the property named and have walkie-talkies so they can find each other. We had our butterfly count up there the last time we were there was over 80 species. So it's pretty spectacular when you go through an area like this, and pretty beautiful. A big initiative that took place during 2018 and 2020 through a grant was Monarchs in the Rough. I believe that was in conjunction with NABA, and where they sent out a package to all the golf courses in North America, Canada, US, and Mexico, trying to get these golf courses to participate in pollinator plantings in the rough parts of the golf courses, which is a great idea because there's just an awful lot of green space, and also reduce and eliminate chemicals to the extent possible. So it would be great if this could continue because there is a lot of green space on these golf courses, it could be used. They did have some fairly decent success with that, especially in the Midwest, a lot more success. Unfortunately, Florida didn't fare too well with the most golf courses in the United States. There's an awful lot of opportunity here for us to increase that. So some work can still be done, and these are just easier places to get this accomplished if we get some boots on the ground to communicate with these places. So sizes of butterflies range from the queen being about half the size of a dollar bill to our giant swallowtail, which is the size, its wingspan can be up to the size of a dollar bill, which is the largest butterfly in North America. And we have a dime-sized butterfly. This is a little Cassius blue. And we have the little metal mark, which is about the size of a nickel. And then some of our hair streaks are about the size of a quarter. So they range in all different sizes. Butterflies, the differences between butterflies, skippers, and moths. Butterflies have little clubs on the end of their antenna, and they emerge from a chrysalis, not a cocoon. And butterflies are solar powered. They really need warmth, first of all, and above 60 degrees typically. There are occasions where they'll fly on a cloudy day, but they do need need high humidity, and they need some warmth, and sunny days are the best. When they land on a flower and their wings are warm, they're typically going to fold those wings, and that's how you're going to tell that it's a butterfly, and no matter what size it is. And skippers really share features between butterflies and moths, but they are considered in the butterfly family. They're day flyers, and their antennas are curvy. As a caterpillar, though, most of the caterpillars actually eat at night, and they wrap themselves up in leaves like a lot of moths will do. They're leaf rollers, and they pupate in leaf litter like moths do. So they do share some features, and their chrysalis, in a lot of cases, looks a lot like a cocoon. So they do share some features of both butterflies and moths. And then moths are going to have fluffier antennas. They come out of a cocoon. They emerge out of a cocoon. They're mostly nocturnal. There are some day-flying species. For example, if you're walking through a field and you see something flying and then it disappears under a blade of grass or under a leaf, that's typically going to be a moth, whereas butterflies will sit on top of flowers and be obvious. And when they land, like under your lights by your front doors and stuff, they're going to land with their wings flat. So that's also another way that you'll know that it's a moth. And of course, this is a Luna moth, but this is one you have to go out in the middle of the night to really see. But it's one of our more stunning moths in the state of Florida. And here I am. It's the tax deadline eve for my businesses, and my tax partner sent me this funny. I think she thought this was funny because, I do have butterfly expenses. So technically I can claim those. But it was just kind of a funny thing on tax day. So total brush-footed butterflies in Central Florida is about 25. And we have talked about the monarch and the queen already. Another one that really isn't in at least the Tampa Bay area. I'm not 100% sure if it's up in your area over there north of Orlando, but I think it's a little bit more south now, is a soldier butterfly, which is down below. It's similar in color to the monarch, whereas the queen butterfly is a little bit more root beer in color, and it has fewer spots than the queen butterfly, fewer white spots. But we don't really see those here, but these are all our milkweed butterflies. And this is a butterfly that's about, I would say 3/4 of the size of a monarch, has little white clubbed antennas. This is our American lady. And their host plant is native cudweed, which I'm sure most gardeners are going to pull that out as consider it a weed, which it does have weed in the name, just like milkweed does. But this is what the American lady will lay her eggs on, and her caterpillars will eat. And if you happen to see this plant, the caterpillars are usually towards the top where those flowers are, and they kind of wrap themselves in what looks like sort of a spitball. And that's how they protect themselves from predators. And painted lady, very similar, but more spots on the hind wings. This one likes thistles, mallows, and other things. It's a lot less picky about what it's going to eat. It's a smaller butterfly, but again, has the little white clubs on the end of their antenna as well. Very similar looking butterflies. So passion vines, these are really popular with home gardeners. Especially they like these showy purple flowers. And we have butterflies that really like those as well. This happens to be my favorite passion vine. I love corky stem because of its flexibility of where it will grow pretty much anywhere in the shade and the sun and everything in between. And I also like the fact that it feeds the birds as well as the butterflies. And butterflies that are in our area that use the passion vine. Well, I guess I need more to drink. The passion vines are these variegated fritillaries, the Julia and the zebra longwing, which is our state butterfly, and the Gulf fritillary. The Julia is not typically going to come to a garden. They are really don't really enjoy noise pollution too well. Our northernmost population of them in the Bay Area was actually near Apollo Beach, which near the Center for Conservation, and it was in a certain preserve down there. Next to that preserve, construction started. I guess Conagra is building a big manufacturing plant. So when they started that construction, the Julias have disappeared. So hopefully when construction ends, either they will reappear and come back, or we can try to repopulate them in that little area there. But these are some really nice butterflies to attract to your garden. If you plant the passion vine in the sun, you're more apt to get the Gulf fritillary laying eggs because they like it hot. If you plant like the corky stem in the shade, because it will also do well in the shade, you can attract the zebra longwing because the zebra longwing likes it a little bit cooler. This has actually become quite popular with a lot of our customers, is replacing their non-native lawns with frog fruit. And I asked them always to send me pictures because I like to see what it looks like when they're finished. And this is actually in an HOA community, this lawn, and they only have to mow this once a year, and they're edging it about every 6 or 8 weeks. So their maintenance is a whole lot lower, which is pretty fabulous. And it's evergreen, and it also has these cute little flowers with the purple centers and the pinkish white around there. And it's the host plant for these 3 butterflies. So you get a lot more movement, not to mention bees loving those plants, and other pollinators and butterflies really enjoy the nectar from those plants as well. So it brings a lot more movement to the yard, and it's very easily maintained. So the FANN crescent, which was in the slide before, is on the right-hand side. And this is where some of these smaller butterflies get to be a little bit challenging when we're out in the field trying to do butterfly counts. The pearl crescent on the left actually hosts on asters, which can be in the same area as frog fruit and plants that the FANN crescent like. And the only real difference, notable difference, is the cream colored on the forewings of the FANN crescent that's on the right versus the pearl crescent not having those same cream colored markings. So IDing butterflies in the field, especially when their wings are warm and they're flying fast, gets to be a little bit challenging. So we really love it when photographers are with us and can get good images so we can double check the butterflies that we're counting. So this is how challenging it gets. These butterflies are between the size of a dime and a nickel, so they're pretty small. And the red spotted purple and the Viceroy, this is kind of an interesting combo here. They host on coastal plain willow, and these butterflies actually can breed with each other. And I've gotten them from breeders telling me that I've got red spotted purple, so that's what I expect to come out. And next thing I know, I've got a Viceroy. So the chrysalis look the same. The caterpillars are very similar, so very difficult to tell them apart when they're going through their early stages of metamorphosis till the butterfly emerges. But these are a couple of really pretty butterflies. And then red Admiral. This one likes false nettle, is a very common plant for it. And the springtime pellitory is popping up, and that's what it uses early on. And then the pellitory dies off, so it starts to use false nettle and some other plants. This is a really pretty butterfly. It's a medium size, I would say, that should be coming through our area now. I've heard some folks have been having sightings, but kind of a fun one to attract to the garden too. And our hackberry butterflies. So these 4 butterflies use the hackberries to host. And we have been seeing some of them as far as Sarasota recently, which has been pretty cool. Unusual sightings because it's not very common to get them that far south. So we've been seeing some of these, especially the Hackberry Emperor and the Tawny Emperor down there at Celery Field. So that's been kind of fun. Mangrove Skipper, usually going to see these guys around saltwater where the red mangroves are. And they're a large skipper. as skippers go. I think one of the larger ones. So very stunning colors with their sort of purplish aqua color scheme for a skipper. A lot of skippers don't have such bright colors, but this one's really, really pretty. So if you're near saltwater and red mangroves, keep your eye out for this one. They're sure to be there somewhere. And then Seder butterflies. These, interestingly, will feed on grasses, a whole lot of different grasses. If they're not chemically treated, they'll survive it. But these are very difficult to see and spot because they blend in so well to their surroundings. And the eye spots are typically the easiest way to spot them, but they are difficult to find when we're out on counts. And most of these guys are usually in the woods. So there's a lot of leaf litter, which they blend right into. So unless you find them moving and can spot where they land, they're tricky. And then our Rudy Daggerwing. This one likes the fig and banyan tree and any plants, I guess, in the fig family. Kind of an interesting looking butterfly. The wing shape is pretty unique and almost like the swallowtail. It has those tails coming off the bottom of its wings. So this is kind of a cool one to find as well. So in closing, this is a picture up at St. Mark's. I was looking for monarchs, found a ton of Gulf fritillaries on this salt bush, and a little bit down the road found a whole lot of monarchs too. This was like, I think in mid-October last year. And then I went back to Cedar Key a couple weeks later in early November. I was not expecting to see any migrators, but the monarchs were running late this year. Apparently there were so many monarchs. So if you get an opportunity between mid-October to the early parts of November to go either to St. Mark's up in the Panhandle or Cedar Key, there's just a whole lot of monarch activity, Gulf fritillaries, and some of the migrators going through there. So pretty cool time to visit if you get a chance to do that. Highly recommend it. Not to mention all the birds that are going through too. So that's the end of my presentation. And I don't know if we have questions that we wanted to get to.
Yeah, let's check it out. Anita, first of all, I have to say, I am just blown away by the presentation. Just every time, it's just amazing to just witness just a level of detail that I'm sure even our viewers can agree that is hard to come by. So thank you so much for putting together some really awesome slides. Folks, if you are still tuned in, now is a good time to put your questions and your comments in the chat box. We can take all of them, some of them, depending on, how many actually roll in, and Anita can answer them for you in real time. So let's go through this. Joy Medlong actually writes from Facebook, and Corky's passion vine grow up and around a camphor tree. We do know about camphor tree. I think that she's getting to is the tree cannot be removed, right? But it's lifted very high. So,
well, one thing interesting about the camphor tree, I know it being invasive, there is a tiny little benefit to it. The spice bush butterfly will actually use it as a host plant. But yeah, corky stem probably could grow up. I would imagine you could train it to grow up a tree. It's not a very aggressive vine, so it doesn't take over like some other things. I like Virginia creeper to grow on just about anything. That's one of my go-tos for vines. It's a host plant for quite a few moths and tons of bird food that it produces with the berries, and also the moths that use it as a host plant. So that's something. And then it gives you the fall colors, which is kind of pretty too. But you could try corky stem growing up a tree. I have it kind of growing on a fence. I use it as a ground cover. I don't think it's going to take over the tree for sure. It's not that kind of a vine.
Amazing. So a lot of thank yous. So let me go through the thank yous. But folks, now is a good time to ask some nuanced butterfly questions. I actually got some of them written down on a little notepad here, so I'll be asking Anita about her advice. But Louise writes, loving this. Thank you so much. Steven Steinbaker, one of our directors at large, so amazing. Thank you. Lisa writes the same thing. Loved this presentation. We definitely enjoyed it a lot. And Matt Camacho Vieira, she is.
Hey, look at that, another Camacho.
Yes. Yes, and she happens to be a director at large for Florida Native Plant Society State. So thank you so much, Mac, for joining us. Great presentation. Thank you. So I had a question for you, Anita. I have the milk vine, the Phenastrum clausum. I forget its common name. You can help me with that. But I have it trellised around my mailbox in semi-shade. So some hours it does get direct sun, some hours, most of the time it's in bright shade. I have never seen monarchs oviposit on it, lay eggs on it at all. Yeah. And as you mentioned in your presentation, it's not favored. They would rather do that on milkweed rather than milk vine. But as far as I know, there is no milkweed around. I see maybe one or two errant monarchs in my neighborhood. Should I even consider, if you have another person that's viewing this now or later, should they even consider planting milk vine besides it looking just pretty once it's in bloom?
Well, a lot of monarch lovers really like that plant because if you do run out of milkweeds, the monarchs will eat it. So you can, put gloves on and transfer the caterpillars over to the milk vine, and they will eat it. It's not their go-to. We do see in the field queens on it quite often, and they will lay eggs on it. So the queens, like in multiple species we see in the field that are not easily propagated, but when they're growing, the queens are using it. So when we find those vines, we know the little pockets where they're going to be, and we know we're going to see queen butterflies there. But I think it's certainly a worthy plant. It does need a little direction. It likes to kind of, I call it, we're trying to do a topiary of it at the shop, and I call it my messy hair plant. So it doesn't really want to stay really round, but I keep kind of making the vines go where I want them to go. So it's kind of in a little ball now, but yeah.
Yeah, that's
it
right.
Looks like its hair sticking up all the time when the vine starts shooting out new growth.
That's right. And Mac writes white twine line. Thank
Yep.
you, Mac. I appreciate that. PJ Espinal. Hey, PJ, it's good to see you. Or see you online, I guess. I was told by a Bastion Monarch Society to draw monarchs here in Florida due to a virus. How about a butterfly virus and monarchs? I think that what she's trying to say is she was advised not to grow or try to raise monarchs here in Florida due to the OE pathogen. So what's your take on that? I'm assuming that you'd be in agreement with that, correct?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we do have folks that are involved with International Butterfly Breeders Association that take extreme measures. And I've spent days at their places where they are doing the breeding to raise very healthy butterflies, to put more healthy butterflies back into the ecosystem. And they do it in various different ways, but their labs are almost as sterile as an operating room at a hospital. So it's the introduction to tropical milkweed has also been a contributor, as well as home rearing. And I think that, we all felt like, well, we're helping. So put them in a habitat to protect them from the wasp and protect the monarch caterpillar at all costs. So there was a lot of different schools of thought. Some of it is just, the metamorphosis process is so fascinating. So you want to watch it, and doing that a couple times is one thing. But when we start to mass rear, a few hundred or thousands of monarchs, they get stressed out. Number one, you end up getting some inbreeding because they're staying in their area right there, especially if they're a resident population. And the stress increases the risk of the diseases, not just OE, but OE is the most prevalent disease. And the tropical milkweed is known to host more spores of that disease. It doesn't have the same defense mechanisms in Florida that it does in Mexico. So consequently, that's increased the rate of the disease as well. And in Central Florida, based on the 3 studies I've participated in so far, we went about 6 or 7 years ago, we were at about a 70% rate on some of those studies, and now we're at about 90%.
Wow.
So it has gone exponentially higher, and I think probably COVID might not have helped because it gave someone a hobby.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true.
You know,
That's
and
true.
I understand the passion for sure. I'm a butterfly lover, but you know, we do try to encourage people to let wild be wild. I mean, we're not bringing the panther in, and they're much more threatened than the monarchs.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right. Yeah.
so I kind of try. It is fun to do a couple of times for sure, but then it's, you
So,
know, becomes a mission
yeah.
going out and looking for the caterpillars and, you know, watching and I know for people, they get upset when the wasps eat them. I don't watch. I don't watch. It's
Yeah.
part of it's a necessity, really, and it's also they're helping to control disease by some of that maintenance. And each monarch, it lays between 300 and 400 eggs, each female. So if all of those lived, we would have more than a love bug season. That in the heyday of love bug season. So the insect order lays a lot of eggs. The idea being that 2 to 8 of those 300 or 400 butterflies should live. So it increases, it at least replaces the population and increases it a little bit. And you know, some of it, they're not bird food, but other predators will eat the monarch caterpillars. And they're an important part of the food chain. So it's hard to watch, but it is important. And I think when you start looking at all the other things going on in the milkweed ecosystem, there's a lot more. And then there's so many other butterflies too.
So I agree. Question now, I'm sure others are thinking the same thing. Perennis, Asclepias perennis, are snowy milkweed. It doesn't go dormant in the winter. Many of our casual conversations always proselytize the dormancy as a value or as something that is preferred for milkweed because that limits, you know, the transmission of OE. But because perennis stays pretty much, you know, evergreen throughout the year, why favor perennis over Corysabica, the tropical milkweed still?
Well, the perennis doesn't harbor the spores the same way. It has better defense mechanisms against it because it is a native to Florida versus the tropical milkweed, which is not. And there's just been way too many studies that have demonstrated that. And even cutting it back, you know, it helps to a point. But if you've got butterflies that are sticking around your gardens in the same area, which are resident butterflies, are not flying to Mexico, then if they're full of the disease, they're going to lay eggs, and the next thing you know, it just kind of keeps going, and the next population is going to be just as sick, if not sicker. We actually, in these studies, we literally looking at these slides of the spores under the microscope and counting the spores. It's crazy and not easy to do. Kind of makes your eyes go crossed, but yeah, so it would definitely be favored. You don't have to cut the perennis back, and it's only going to get a couple feet tall. It doesn't spread as crazy as the tropical milkweed does. I have tropical milkweed pops up in my yard because my neighbor has it in her backyard with a big fence, but it kind of floats over, and the next thing I know, I'm finding it again, and I have to wait till it blooms to be 100% sure it's not my pink swamp milkweed, because
my gosh,
when it's really little and a young plant, they look a lot alike each other.
Oh my gosh. Matt Camacho writes, what can folks do as citizen scientists to assist in conservation of butterflies? So what can people like you and I do to raise butterfly awareness effectively and actually help them?
Well, I think it's just, you know, let wild be wild. As citizen science, there are some programs with Journey North and Monarch Watch. There's tagging programs where you can tag the monarchs. And that's something that, you know, when that information, they see how far the monarch goes. If someone collects that monarch or finds it and is able to turn that tag number in, then you get a little bit of information about where the monarch started and where it ended up, whether or not it's a migrator or just a local butterfly. So there are some of those things that can be done. And they have videos and all kinds of things to show you how to tag the butterflies. So that's something. Planting more native milkweed is the #1 best way to help the monarch butterflies. And with any of the butterflies, they just need more habitat. And a lot of people experience when they first get into this gardening for butterflies, the monarchs eat their milkweed, strip it right down, and they find them right away. That's the fastest between that and the Gulf fritillary. Those are the 2 fastest butterflies to have in your yard. if you plant for them. I've literally been pulling plants out of my van at a site to get ready to plant, and immediately those 2 butterflies showed up and started laying eggs. And I had witnesses, so they're like, well,
I know it.
This is just justification for what we're doing. But planting more milkweeds, what will happen ultimately is they'll settle down. They'll know that there's milkweed there. A lot of people continue to buy more milkweed, which is an option, surely, but you can just let nature kind of get settled in and get a balance going so that, you don't have to feed them all. But encourage neighbors to plant. So if we start getting pocket gardens, even if they do it in a pot, you can do a butterfly garden in a pot on a patio without a screen, and you can still bring the monarchs in and other butterflies as well. We do have a lot of people that do that in condos. We're in a city here where I am, and these monarchs fly pretty high. They'll find it. They will find the milkweed. That is for sure.
Solid point.
Yeah. So I think it's just planting more habitat, planting what they need. So that they have food. And that's really, every time a piece of property gets cleared, it just all gets cleared. Nothing is left behind. There's no imagination to what those native plants might be. They're just considered weeds. So one thing I've actually been trying to start is getting in touch with developers and actually groups, the companies that go out and scrape the land. So we did this with our Encore project, where before they scraped a property for another high rise to go up, we went and actually harvested a lot of the native plants and rehomed them. So trying to get some of these plants to where the butterflies don't completely lose their habitat and that they're used to having in those little areas, it all adds up and it all helps. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Grow your pollinator buffet. Yeah. That's what Anita is telling us. Grow native plants and then leave nature to its devices. It will find its balance. And monitoring butterflies is good. Butterfly surveys are a really fun thing here at Cuplet Fern. We participated in one last year. Boy, did we realize how rusty we were. We thought we'd be out there, wow. We know exactly what these things are. They are flying so fast. Yeah. You got to have your binoculars. You got to be patient. But yes, the experience was really fun. We're looking forward to doing it again this summer. Speaking of NABA and other types of butterfly associations, Mark Kalmanson, he's a member of ours. He's wondering, how is the local chapter of the American Butterfly Association started?
Well, super easy, you ask. So you just get in touch with NABA through naba.org. I can also help you get in touch with them. And it helps to have sort of what I'll call a sponsor buddy system with another chapter, like my chapter, to kind of give you the lay of the land and get you started. I had that. I was very fortunate that the South Sarasota chapter, their president was phenomenal and gave me a big leg up when I started. I think it's about 6-7 years ago, our chapter here. So it kind of helped me learn the ropes and what I needed to do, what they were doing, and how we could accomplish the same things. And we do joint field trips with them a lot and work together. I mean, we're all kind of in this together, so it really does help to have kind of a mentor to lead the way a little bit. So, but it's really easy to start a chapter. You do have to register with the state of Florida, but the tax returns are all done by NABA National, so you don't have to do any of those kind of things. It's just an annual renewal with the state of Florida. And then memberships, if you start a chapter, you will probably already have membership because people are members they do it by zip code. So you'll have a certain area or radius that becomes part of your chapter. That's and then awesome. From that, you get the membership, and then you're getting usually a quarterly notification of your new members and people that drop off and stuff, and you can chase them down and try and get them to renew. And they have a couple magazines that come out, really nice magazines every quarter that are really, really spectacular. And the website's a little bit dated, but there's good information out there. We kind of started to do our own website, which links to that. And all the membership goes through them. You're not having to maintain that necessarily, other than chase down people who might have lapsed or something like that. But it's a fun group. Most of what I find NABA folks like to do, we've got a combination of people. A lot of people are nature photographers. We have a lot of people who just want to go out and do butterfly counts. So the photographers like the counters because we're spotting the butterflies that they can take pictures of. So it kind of works well. And it also helps, we work a lot with the Native Plant Society members too. So they're able to identify the native plants that the butterflies are using. So it all really works together.
Right.
And it's really fun to get all these like-minded people from these different components together to make it work. And then you have a little bit of a gardening aspect, some folks that are NABA members that are gardeners, but I would say it's, a lot of people are in it for the counts, and it's the hottest time of year when we're doing the annual counts. July.
Sure is.
But when you're focused on the butterflies, you don't worry about it. You don't think about the mosquitoes that are chewing you up. And
yeah, I would recommend a Native Plant Society member, at least one or two per butterfly count group, because those people are checking out plants because they know their larval host capacities. So a great anecdotal story is I spotted Dutchman's pipevine, and then I immediately was looking if there was any pipevine swallowtail caterpillars on it, and we didn't find the pipevine swallowtail caterpillar. We found the polydamas caterpillar on it. So it was pretty cool. It was we identified the plant, and lo and behold, we spotted a caterpillar, and we got to mark it down as part of the survey.
Yeah.
Anita, you have a lot of questions coming in, so let's kind of pare them down one after another. Joy Medlong writes, she's kind of tacking this on to her original question about the camphor tree. Rather than using it as a trellis, is there anything that you can place under that tree? Native porterweed, beautyberry are nearby. I would use frog fruit instead of mulch. Any other suggestions for her?
Well, porterweed's going to really like more sun and not want to be in a shady condition, and they like it kind of dry too. So I don't know that would be the best thing underneath. You could, rouge plant would be good. Wild coffee is always good. Even the dwarf wild coffee that doesn't get as tall, because then the birds can they come out of the trees, get their berries. They have their escape hatch back into the tree. Beautyberry is awesome. But you're going to be dealing with a root system. So you're going to have to kind of go out away from the trunk a fair bit to put some of those plants in. Shallower root system, rouge, would grow in the shade, and it produces the berries for the birds, and it's constantly blooming and going through its cycle. So that's one I like for an understory plant too. It doesn't get much more than 3 feet tall, but likes the shade. What are some other shady things? Those are the ones that are coming to my head right now.
Yeah, and perennis, like you say, grow.
Perennis, absolutely.
In anything.
Yeah.
Perennis sun, shade, wet, dry.
Woodland phlox, woodland phlox is a really nice ground cover.
That's beautiful.
So, there are quite a few different opportunities for understory plants. And one thing you can do is just go on a native plant walk and sort of look and see what's growing under different trees too,
Absolutely. PJ was continuing early on, like maybe 5-10 minutes ago in our conversation when we were talking about twine vine and other types of milkweed. So she's concerned that I think she's further south. She may be closer to Tampa than Orlando, but she's looking at counties and seeing if she needs to be, she needs to look at it. Is there a resource that you can point her to help her out to see if she's planting right plant, right place kind of mentality where a larval host plant is readily grown in her region? Is there a resource that you can point out for the viewers?
The USF Atlas, Plant Atlas, is a really popular one for vouchered plants that are, if you're looking to be what I'll call a native plant wholesome person that doesn't like plants out of their zone, out of their region. That one is a really good one that will say, give you the idea of where that plant has actually been vouchered in the state of Florida. So you can stay within the region of where that plant historically has come from. So, so being a purist, I would, if you're going to go that route, then I would use that website for my go-to. It's pretty vast website.
That's absolutely right. Plantatlas.usf.edu, guys. Lanishka Klepper writes, hey Nish, She writes, what is the best way I can support butterflies?
Just
So
plant more
again,
food and more nectar. Host plants
exactly.
and nectar plants.
Exactly. PJ writes about kuntis. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I see the question like how far north they can grow. I'm not 100% sure. I know the answer to that. I know we can grow them here easily. Kunti, the value of that plant is really for the Atala, but it's also a really nice evergreen, and I find it to be just a really good plant for landscape and no maintenance really once it's planted. But here in your area, you wouldn't have the Atala. It's never been vouchered there or counted. It was endangered in South Florida. They have brought the population back down there, which is south of Naples. But Hillsborough County and Pinellas County actually have vouchered populations of that butterfly, but haven't had any sightings other than my nursery because we're trying to repopulate them. We've got a big project going on with Florida Fish and Wildlife and the aquarium to try and repopulate them because they had been vouchered up to 15 years ago in Hillsborough and Pinellas counties. Those are the only two counties, and then there's just a big gap in between us and south of Naples. But east of Hillsborough County, they have not been vouchered until you get much further south. But the kunti still, for me, it's a landscape value. So it's not going to serve butterflies, over there where you guys are. But but here they're eating it up right now.
Oh yes, and the Atala butterfly and the skipper that's also uses it as a larval host. I believe they're more they're best represented in South Florida. Up here, they're just vagrant, and they don't seem to overwinter here for sure. L. London writes, we are considering planting frog fruit for grass. Where should we purchase in the Orlando area? How much per square foot?
Well, it depends on the grower you're getting it from. You can go to plantruralflorida.org and find a nursery near you. That's the best resource. That's part of the group that FANN has put together, Florida Association of Native Nurseries, and that's the website for individuals to look for a nursery near you. I don't know how expensive it is from nursery to nursery. We do work out at our nursery a special arrangement for people that are doing and buying in big quantity. And I would say we typically say if it's a 1 gallon plant, which is often the size that we find it coming in is a 1 gallon pot, we plant it, one for every 5 feet. And some people want it to fill in a lot faster, so they'll plant it more dense. That's a choice, but it will spread out. And once those little tendrils reach each other, they start making those connections. Then it starts to really fill in pretty quickly.
That's right. And I think, Anita, you touched on a beautiful phrase very early on in your presentation, a victory lawn or a freedom lawn.
Freedom lawn.
A freedom lawn is so good, guys. Like, for example, I think it was just so not empowering, just breathtaking to see what cudweed, something as humble as cudweed can do. What was the butterfly that it uses it as?
The American lady. Yeah.
The American lady. What a beautiful specimen too. And it's just a testament that, sometimes when we move away from lawn, we move away from just a gigantic patch of Bahia or St. Augustine. Try not to lean towards just one species of native plant. Try to mix them up together. The more variety you have, you increase your chances and your odds of attracting a plethora of different butterflies that are local to your region.
That's right. Yep.
PJ Espinal writes, I have firebush in South Florida and lots of butterflies came. Is that a native? And will it grow in Marion County? So Marion is like Ocala region. Lots of zebra longwing swallowtails were always around.
Yeah, that one can get a little bit frostbit, so to speak, when we have a cold snap. That is one I will cover even here, unless it's up next to my house, which I have one next to the house, did just fine, looks amazing, and we had a freeze. Then I had one that was further away, back in the very back of the nursery that I forgot about covering, and it's coming back. They're woody plants. Yes. They do tend to come back, but they're little sometimes, once they've been frostbit to come back, but they do come back. A little further north, Ocala does get a lot colder than it does here in Tampa. And I'm kind of in the 10 was it zone 10B? So because we're on the
Mm-hmm.
water, so we
Mm-hmm.
kind of we're a little bit lucky. This little
Lucky
strip.
you.
You're very lucky.
Very lucky.
But yeah,
No wonder you
Seder
have
Butterflies.
Atalas.
Yeah, see, you have to come see my Atalas.
Joy writes again, thank you. And this is just part of a massive thread of thank yous that you're receiving through all our channels. So I want to make sure you receive that, Anita. But firebush, it's an excellent plant, PJ. You had mentioned that, and I would still recommend growing it in Marion County. You know, like Anita mentioned, I second that. It'll regrow even from its base. I mean, if it's frozen all the way down to the ground, it will come back up once established. So need not worry. It's an excellent plant for nectar, for butterflies. But once it fruits, it's an important bird food source as
Right.
well. So
For sure.
it does double duty in that sense. It's a wonderful plant to have.
And just don't cut it back too soon. Really give it some time to make a recovery, because woody plants, similar to trees that just lose all their leaves, they're going to sprout back out from those stems that don't look like much. And the firebush does the same thing. And just you got to give it a lot of time. If there's flexibility in the stem, it's still viable. It'll just take some time to push the leaves out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Folks, I think I have answered. We have taken all your questions, and we have expressed your thanks to Anita. Anita, this is just round one. We'll see you next month for Swallowtail
Cocktail. Yeah.
Yes.
That's going to be fun.
So exciting. Yes. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us. This brings our presentation to a conclusion. And Anita, thank you so much. I know it's a busy time of the year for you. So hopefully by next month, things should slow down a bit as well.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right, guys. We'll take care for now.
All right.
And we'll see you soon.
Have a good one. Thank you.